Compelling stories are not hard to find. You just need to know where to look. Join your host, Dr. Eric Shaw, prosecutor Ryan Frank, writer Adrian Bonenberger, and comedian Ryan Connor as they interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. This is Baggage.
Hi, and welcome to the show. With us today is Rebecca Gumaer. She is a local Denver family law attorney. She works for Front Range Family Law. She trained at Tulane. She is board certified in Colorado. And I'm going to turn things over to her to just kind of start with an introduction of who she is and how she got started as a lawyer.
Well, hey guys, my name is Rebecca, and as Eric said, I am a family law attorney. I run my own shop called Front Range Family Law in the suburbs of Denver. I grew up in upstate New York and ran away from it as fast as I could. I went to undergrad at Tulane in New Orleans, which was fantastic. I took a couple years off, and then I went to Loyola Law School in New Orleans. And I had always wanted to be a lawyer since I was 3, 4, 5. My mother worked for Mid-Hudson Legal Services, which is basically a place where poor people in New York could go and get help for landlord-tenant. Abused women could get help. They would get help with divorce. And the attorneys that she worked with, she was a legal assistant. She wasn't an attorney. The attorneys she worked for were absolutely amazing. Men and women who graduated from Harvard Law School, graduated from Yale Law School, and they were making $20,000, $30,000 in the early to mid 80s just to help people out. And so that's what I always wanted to do. And when I graduated Loyola Law School, I assumed that I would do what I had been clerking for in theory, which was maritime personal injury, big money, quantum damages, making a lot of money in the PI area down in New Orleans, which is very lucrative. So I took the bar in July of 2005, and then here comes Hurricane Katrina. Katrina came in Labor Day of 2005 and ate up opportunities, ate up the city. And so I had to relocate from New Orleans to Colorado. I had to sit for the Colorado bar. And if anybody knows the difference between common law and civil law, it's completely different. So I sat for the Colorado bar in February of 2006. Unlike many people think, just if you pass a bar in one state, you don't automatically get to practice in another state. It's completely different. So I took that, and the first lawyer to offer me a job was out in the burbs in Lakewood, and it was to be a divorce attorney, and for $42,000 a year. And this was in 2005, early 2006. And so if anybody had told me when I went to law school or undergrad that I would be a divorce lawyer, I would have laughed in your face and bought you a cocktail on Bourbon Street, because that's not what I wanted to do. However, based on my background and all of the really interesting situations I've found myself in over the years, being a divorce law really works with my personality. I tell my prospective clients, and I remind my current clients that sorry guys, I don't know if you let me swear, but I'm going to do it anyway. You can edit it out later. I tell my prospectives and my clients, I am a no bullshit lawyer. I will tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. Some people really like that, but other people want to go to the firms, of which there are many, who will prey on your emotional turmoil. And they will pay, prospective clients will pay as much money as it takes because they feel like they can really get out their ex-spouse or their co-parent. And so that's my journey. And I worked for an attorney on his own, just he and I, until 2013. And then I went out on my own, and 11 years in, and we're still going.
I have, right off the bat, so many questions. And first of all, comments. We could spend an hour with the trauma of taking 2 bar exams, within a year of each other?
Within a year.
And what I remember from law school was, you're training for the multi-state portion of the bar exam, and they teach you like all this stuff, and this is what you need to know. Unless you're going to practice in New Orleans, don't worry about that. And then they tell you everything else. So or in Louisiana, Louisiana is just French common law,
civil law.
Anywhere else in the state.
It's civil law.
It is just a different animal that they don't even touch in law school. And every other state, they're like, just don't worry about it. Just go to law school in Louisiana if you want to practice in Louisiana.
Right.
Because it's just different. So you have to go from that. And then what I would say is Colorado is more of like a all the other 49 states, more the kind of general law.
Right.
And do that. That sucks. Now, you had said the divorce lawyers that are predators. I've only ever done criminal law, but some people step their toe a little bit in criminal, a little bit in family. So I talk to people and I hear some horror stories where it is, $30,000, $40,000 in, and the divorce attorney gets out, and they find a reason to get out of the case. Do you come across that? How often, frequent is that, where you have divorce attorneys fleecing their clients and then, you have to pick up the mess?
Okay, well, two different answers. First, you see divorce lawyers fleecing their clients all the time and not getting out, because what they know, the divorce lawyer would know, is how much in assets that they have, right? And how much they're going to be able to get their hands on. And in Colorado, you can represent someone all through the divorce process. And then if you don't get paid, you can file an attorney's lien into the divorce case. And then you get your first dibs before the spouse gets theirs. So
you're like
have
advocating for yourself.
I don't have that. So I don't have that experience where somebody will pay 30, 40 grand and the lawyer gets out. If somebody's got that much money in the beginning, they're going to stay in and see that $100,000 payout, which to me is absolutely atrocious. There's absolutely no reason to pay $100,000 for a divorce. But Colorado also has some other things that are very costly when you're talking about kids, either in the divorce or in the parental responsibilities, what everybody else calls custody world. And those are experts that a lot of these other states don't have. And my opinion is that these experts harm financially the families. They can get very aligned with the attorneys, and there's no cap. There's something called a parental responsibilities evaluator. There's no cap for their fees. So you can spend $60,000 just on whether or not somebody wants an equal parenting time schedule. If you have people who lead you to, it's beyond crazy. And a lot of other states,
crazy.
Yeah, a lot of other states, Ryan, really make fun of Colorado, how we really mishandle family law cases, how we don't have dedicated family law dockets, and how we let these people come in with minimal vetting to spend this money and make these determinations. In fact, it got so bad that I think it was the beginning of last year that the Supreme Court Administrative Office began overseeing the child and family investigators and the parental responsibilities evaluators, because so many got in trouble where you'd have, like, I think it's the Colorado Springs Gazette or a couple other smaller papers that exposed a lot of malfeasance. In one case, you had a parental responsibilities evaluator who himself was the subject of committing domestic violence, and he pled guilty, but he never disclosed this. So then every case where he found DV or didn't find DV had to be re-looked at. And then there's one woman who just got extradited from Texas because she lied about her credentials and that she was licensed, and messed up, harmed so many families and received so much money. So it is just, yeah. And so ideally I sit on the side of, I don't want to say holistic, but I practice in a more holistic way.
I don't know if you come across this person, but I read an article about her about a year ago, and I know she's based in Colorado, where she is a kind of the other parent's advocate, if you will. And she has this theory that the kids start to hate the abusing parent because of, I'm going to mess up this theory, that the good parent is like telling them things about the bad parent. It's like skewing their beliefs about the bad parent. And then she advocates for putting the kids with the bad parent to then like make up for this. And so there's been this series of rulings where they've placed the abused kids with the abuser because of this woman's theory. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I had a case with this woman. So there are a few people who, some CFIs and some PREs, who it's alienation. Okay. It's parental alienation, which was actually going to be in the DSM-4 or the DSM-5. And then they said, no, there's no such thing. So at a higher level, there is this dispute. Is parental alienation a thing? Like you just talked about, i.e., it's called favored parent and unfavored parent. So the favored parent by the kiddos allegedly poison kiddos against the unfavored parent. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Also known as parental alienation. And there's TikTok videos where you watch these kids who are running from these people who basically steal them. There's two extremes: steal them, put them in a van, and take them to, I can't remember the name of it, but I could find out later. There's this woman who lives in New York, who basically in the city, who will take the kids and put them in this 4-day intensive boot camp. They're not allowed to talk to the favored parent. They must sit with the unfavored, i.e. abusing parent. And then after that, the children must live with the abuser parent, unfavored parent, and they can't talk to their favored parent for 6 months. And there have been, one of my cases in Denver, they adopted this. They agreed to it. And what the trauma, I mean, can you imagine a trauma to a little kid? And there's also this other thing that the other part of family law that drives me, which is they don't believe the children. I'm over here saying, look, believe the kids. Okay, we all know kiddos can be influenced this way or that way, but believe the kid. Start from the position of believing what the kid says and work your way backwards instead of automatically disbelieving and pointing a finger at a parent. And that's very prevalent here.
This seems so like counter to like Ryan, your world, where you're putting kids up on the stand and they're like your main expert, or not your expert, but your witness for the case. Like, how does this cross with your world?
That's exactly what I was thinking about. Like we deal with that where we can't. You definitely don't want to listen to the parent that's at odds with the defendant. Oh, trust me, this is what my kid said the defendant did. That's super unreliable. They're biased adults. You got to hear from the kid directly. So how do you weed that out? We do child forensic interviews, non-leading questions, let them tell their story. And it's really fantastic where it weeds out, especially the younger kids. You hear rehearsed, because we have people come through there where the parent is trying to push them to say, hey, that wrestling wasn't wrestling, was it? It was something more than that, right? And they use adult language, and you can really weed out the truly non-sexual assault cases. In addition to that, guardian ad litem. That was going to be my question to you. Guardian ad litems are really paramount in our cases, because you have the defendant has their attorney, their criminal defense attorney. The prosecutor is biased because we're trying to prosecute the individual. And then you get a third party lawyer who sometimes wear a hat as a criminal defense attorney, but our guardian ad litem are really great. They're specially trained, and they do put on the impartial hat and say, I've talked to this kid separately. I was there at the forensic interview, and I've had it both ways. I've had a guardian ad litems I really trust, and they have told me like this. I have some serious doubts whether or not this happened. Most of the time, the guardian ad litems are like, yeah, it lines up with law enforcement, but they can be massive, and the judges really rely on them. In Colorado, what is the use of guardian ad litems in family law?
Hardly any.
That's
and
crazy.
That's where you're going to see that.
Crazy.
That's where you're going to see the child and family investigator. That's where you're going to see the parental responsibilities evaluator, who have no training in forensic interviews with kiddos. This is such a biased podcast, but we've talked about this before. You talk about hired experts, and one of their main sources of income is testifying in court. Huge red flag. Correct.
Huge red flag. I don't care if it's a homicide or a sexual assault. Huge red flag. You can find anybody to say anything if there's a price tag attached to it.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
So that's what we were talking about earlier. So I've had, this is another lead in. Anyway, so I've had a number, and I can only talk about Front Range. Okay. Front Range. That's what we talk about in Colorado. I can't tell you what's going on in the mountain communities, or on the Western Slope. Although I have a really strong network of family law attorneys, criminal attorneys all over the place, and we always talk. But I can only speak about Front Range cases, and in the Front Range, GALs are not a thing. And I see posts on our listserv saying, can we get a GAL? And the rest of us who've been practicing for a signet, we're like, good luck. You're not going to get a GAL because you're supposed to get a CFI, child and family investigator, or a PRE, a parental responsibilities evaluator. And then maybe you can get a psych evaluation. Forensic evaluations, get out of here. Nope. Judges will say that's too difficult on the kids. Well, yeah, it's counterintuitive in our world. And for a lot of us attorneys who sit on the side of, look, we don't want to break these families up anymore. It's not our job to come in and cause more problems. It's our job. I think it's my job to come in and solve problems. And there's a really big family law conference every year up in either Vail or Breckenridge, and all the all the big people go. And I remember listening to someone give this huge speech. There was like 300 attorneys there. And I got up and I was like, what about the child? What about what the child wants? And one of the most well-decorated family law attorneys just spits out, we're not hired by the child. We're not GALs. And I'm sitting in the other side thinking, no, you're right. I'm not a GAL. I'm actually a family law attorney. And that's the place I come from. It's mind-blowing. And then you layer on something that I was thinking to talk to y'all about, which is this new slate of judges that's been appointed on the Front Range over the past 4 or 5 years by our governor's committee. A minimal percentage have any background in family law. And in fact, Ryan, they're mostly coming from your place. They're either PDs or DAs who have no experience with family law, no experience in private practice, no understanding of how much these people can pay in attorney's fees. And divorce or family law in Colorado is different than I've learned from a lot of other states. In some other states, in family law, if you get a settlement offer and you don't take that settlement offer and you go to court and you get a ruling that's worse than, or, considered less than the settlement offer, like this is in Nevada. In Nevada, the person who didn't take the settlement offer has to pay the other person's attorney's fees. Right. And that happens a lot in civil cases, too, that, offer and settlement but that doesn't exist here. And the only way you can get fees is if a court deigns to find that somebody did something bad, which they hardly ever do, because family law here is all about equity and there's no bright line rules. And then to equalize the disparity in incomes, but hardly anybody does that either. So it's just, you have these poor people who are on the hook for $100,000. I had someone come to me from a big firm that spent $30,000 over a 3-month period and had never gone to a hearing, had never participated in mediation.
That is just feeding the beast there.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. I know in Louisiana has dedicated family law dockets and dedicated people who work in the family law courtroom that before you see a judge, they identify issues. They talk to you about what kind of help they think you need. And that does not exist here. And it is a complete disservice. And going back to, you put DAs, district attorneys, and public defenders, they've got really great trial experience in theory, but they, again, don't have any family law background. And the brand new baby judges are immediately placed in our family law courtrooms and on our family law cases because they don't have to be in front of a jury, which is even worse. So family law hits everybody, no matter how much money you have or how much property you have, or if you're homeless or destitute or have nothing. Family law touches everybody. And so to think that you don't have a dedicated docket, you don't have people who understand the serious nuances of family interactions and how important it is for kids to feel safe and happy, it's really difficult on many of us.
Have you ever come across a case or cases where you felt that it became, or it was so acrimonious and so difficult, it didn't start that way, but it became that way, that it would have been better, the family would have been better served not divorcing at all? Do you ever look at this and think to yourself, like, why are you doing this to yourselves? Okay.
So to take the acrimony part out, when I started doing this, I was around a couple of divorces. It doesn't have anything to do with the money they're spending or the acrimony, though. So it's a different point to your answer to your question. But you're looking at these people who've been together for 20, 25 years. They've got very healthy assets. They don't hate each other. There's no meanness. And I'm in the room as a young attorney, and I can feel that they still love each other, right? Love is love is such a interesting thing for a divorce lawyer to talk about, but you can feel it. You can feel that they like each other, that they like to be around each other. That's when I think, what are you doing? What are you doing? What's the point? I mean, you got into a marriage, and while it's about love, it's also a state sanctioned entity. And if you're still getting the benefit from it and you like each other, I don't understand what's the point of getting out of it, right? Doesn't everybody like all their stuff and not 50% of their stuff? And you only get 50% of your stuff when you divorce. Now, what I'll tell you about the acrimony is 18 years, 19 years of doing this, and you see the husband and the wife, they go in on each other and the parents go in. What I've seen is the attorney can turn it badly. The attorney, I've watched in the Denver, on the third floor of the Denver District Court, I've just observed an attorney that's, again, one of these high muckety muck lawyers out here. So the husband and wife are sitting together. They're older. They're on the same bench. They're chitty chat. They're fine. This attorney comes up, and you can tell he represents husband, and they're all kind to each other. Then here comes Miss Stomp down the marble hall in her heels. And immediately it's like, why are you two sitting next to each other? You get over here to her client and I need to talk to you. And then all of a sudden, a couple, who knows how long they've been together, who were fine, maybe even drove together, they sometimes do that. All of a sudden now they're spitting at each other in the hallway. So that's my experience, if that helps. And Adrian, I know it's not really to your point, but those are the kind of different scenarios I see relating to your point.
Ryan, this reminds me of the story you talked about. Just like the shadiest lawyers tend to find like the shadiest people, and they're using like the worst techniques, like just stuff that's underhanded and more low ball sort of techniques.
Yeah, and I also think I tell my clients, like calls to like. So sometimes you'll have that spouse or that parent, that man just really wants to shove it to the other spouse or the other parent, and they find those attorneys who have no problem going right along and taking the ride with them. And then you're just living in a nightmare. And your poor client is looking at you like, why do I have to spend this money? And as the attorney, you say, I wish you didn't have to. There's nothing I can do about it. We got to get to the point from A to B, and then we can figure out where to go from there. But still, they've got to spend money. They've got to deal with these responses to ridiculous motions. And it's very difficult. And then you've got, again, these baby judges coming in with no experience, and they get both. We always get the same. If there's a jerk attorney and a decent attorney, we all get the same spiel. Like, both of you are being bad, and both from the judge, like getting yelled at like we're little kids from, a 35-year-old judge. Both of you have to act better. Both of you have to do this. Both of you have to do that. So they don't want to penalize anybody, even though you've got a lawyer who's like, swearing and yelling at the other counsel in writing. It's kind of where we end up. And then, which another thing that's bleeding into my cases from these DAs and PD judges, the judges don't know the burdens. So that it's almost like they're looking at one party as the criminal and one party as the innocent one. And that's been playing out a lot from what I've seen. And it's actually it's given fruition to a new business that I started with two of my other attorney friends who've been practicing. We started a new business trying to keep people out of the courtroom, away especially from these new judges. And it's kind of a one-stop shop, pay a flat fee, kind of depending on what we see as issues in the beginning. There's three of us. One person deals with the financials, does a really informal mediation. Any issues we can't get done, we kick it to the other two attorneys who haven't met or touched or talked to the parties. And it's almost like an arbitration. We do call it a divorce resolution session. You come in, you present. Yeah, you come in, you present your issues.
All through the same business.
Yes. And well, there's two things that a lot of our divorce lawyer colleagues are going to hate. One is you cannot be privately represented during any of the meetings. You can go get your own lawyer outside, but and you can do this under the Colorado, one of the Colorado statutes. We've checked it out with everybody, especially Attorney Regulation Council. You have the ability to waive your right to be represented in this kind of arbitration resolution schema. And none of us give you any legal advice. And that's, I think, the hardest part for us, because we are so used to being, zealous advocates or just at least trying to help. So that's learning curves on our side as well. But so far, we've been doing really good. And the people that have gone through the program are happy. And they're spending X number of dollars, not 20 or 30 or 40 each. But it's, again, getting around the whole, from the attorney's perspective, like other attorneys, not the three of us, like, wait, what do you mean I can't come in and privately represent somebody? Or, I don't understand. Because, again, that's how attorneys make their money. And yeah, more than likely from this, in the first 3 to 5 years, we're not going to make the money we see as private attorneys. But the more people who go through the program, it's called Divorce Depot LLC. The more people go through the program and are happy, the more that they will recommend to others. And we're already, some therapists are sending people to us. Some other people in the community are sending people to us who really, truly want to see more of a collaborative style divorce. So that's positive. And there is something called Big C collaboration divorces. It's a statute now in Colorado, but I think it's more expensive than even sometimes litigating. So the two parties come in, they have to agree, and then they have to hire a financial expert. And even if they don't have any assets or significant assets, they have to fire a financial expert. They have to hire a collaborative facilitator. They have to hire a child psychologist. And then you're looking at $100,000 divorce. And if they litigated it, it might only been 40. So it's messy here. And if you don't have someone who knows what they're doing when your family's dealing with such a huge, harmful, time in their lives, it's a booby trap.
I mean, family law is messy in any state, no matter where you go. And I've only done criminal law, never represented anybody in a divorce or anything like that. But it all happens in the same courthouse. So sometimes you'll have a civil hearing that's wrapping up before the criminal docket starts, or vice versa. So I do see a little bit of it, and I couldn't do it because it's too contentious. I have numerous rape cases pending right now. Just today, I was in court on a sexual assault case. No problems, easy to talk. No raising of voices. Everything was very, very pleasant. But man, on a routine basis, I see some of the civil stuff, especially the divorce stuff, and the stuff that the attorneys are saying in open court about each other. And the judges are just like putting up their hands saying, whoa, 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 hold on, everybody calm down. It's routine. It seems so adversarial is fine. So contentious.
It's adversarial in like to the 10th, 9th, the infinity level. And it doesn't have to be. But then if you take a step back, well, first you and, 99% of all other lawyers don't want anything to do with what I do, which I understand, right? But take it objectively, what other side of the law is based almost 99% on emotion, right?
Exactly.
It's not someone coming in, let's say criminal, and let's say the defendant had intent, right? The defendant has intent to do this thing to the victim. Okay. Or in a, let's say, contract case, someone has an intent to break a contract. This is divorce. It's based on love and butterflies and $50,000 weddings, and everybody's happy until they're not. But what they're fighting from is that emotion that brought them together in the first place. And that doesn't exist in any other part of of what we practice, of the law. And when you look at it like that, you can say, oh my gosh, now I understand why people can come in like harpies, as some lawyers, and really take advantage of it and enmesh and kind of make it their own battle. One of my biggest pet peeves that if I'm feeling kind of spicy, I will school another attorney on, especially the younger ones, is when they say we. Right. We will do this and we will agree to this and we will have the kids this day and this day. And it's what, do you have a mouse in your pocket? There's no we. You and your client are not the same people. And we have to, break that enmeshment and actually work together. Works maybe 1% of the time.
It's sort of interesting because I think that the history of marriage and what that union has meant over the centuries, certainly in our culture, it goes back and forth between, I think, love and property, and at least from my reading, and I'm not like a marriageologist and I'm not a historian, but it really does seem to me that like for much of, and certainly this is, I witnessed this when I was in Afghanistan on 2 combat deployments, talking with folks in the army and the police Afghans, that for a long time, for much of human history, the default with marriage was not love, butterflies. It was either an arranged thing between families, or it was, if it wasn't being arranged for you, you were arranging it yourself politically, economically. And so, but at the same time, in those societies that are much more like, look, we're getting married because your family has some property by the hills and my family has some property by the river, there's usually also huge taboos against divorce. And I'm not sure if that's just a product of sort of development, sort of the development of or the path of that civilizations go along, how certain civilizations approach things. But I think it's, the divorce itself in our society is a product of movements that have really been in play for like the last 80 or 90 years. And before that, it just wasn't, and I'm not saying it should be that way. I mean, I think the murder rate is probably a lot higher in societies that don't have divorce. Or violent crime, people shouldn't have to live in a situation where they're being oppressed or bullied or exploited or worse. But there's a lot of give and take, and so here we have this sort of emotion driven idea of a marriage that's based on love, and people end up getting taken advantage of as a result of that. And maybe we've chucked a lot of that more cynical approach to marriage, and some people should take a look at that. Like maybe it's okay to, for some people to marry, like a business almost, and just be okay with that, but commit to not divorcing thing. I don't know.
Right?
I don't know what I'm saying.
Where else do you see so commingled now, post-Victorian times? Where do you see anything commingled that's contract based on feelings sanctioned by the government? Right? Like it just, now we think about it and it makes no sense, because you don't go to a government class depending which state you live in, to learn about what you're getting into before you get married. You don't know what you've subjected yourself to until you're looking down the barrel of a divorce, right? That's when you learn. And that's why I really, I'm a very big proponent of marital agreements. And most people say one of two things. Well, I don't have anything, so I don't need one. Or I love this person, and we're going to be together forever. And in my experience, it doesn't matter if you have anything or not. More than likely you will. So just get a marital agreement. It takes the state, in theory, out of your love. So why wouldn't you do that? And love is wonderful and feels really good. But what does love have to do with what Colorado legislature, who doesn't know you and never will, told you about what's going to happen to the property that you have when you get divorced? So there's an easy way to opt out of it, but a lot of people, because there's so much stigma about the premarital agreement.
So yeah, now that we know what you do, and we know that know your pet peeves and issues with the Colorado system, do you have any particularly interesting cases or stories that you'd want to share with us from your experience over the years?
One of the things I really love to do is a step-parent adoption. And I've had 2 step-parent adoptions. So you have to be married first. You have to be married for a year. And then there are certain requirements you have to meet to let your new spouse adopt your child, become the legal parent of your child. And I've had 2, really interesting ones where mom and dad live in Virginia and they get divorced, and dad gets the child. Dad and child move here. Dad gets remarried. Dad gets a call one day, and it's from the FBI in Virginia that mom is now under arrest for planning, going forward to murder for hire, to kill him to get the kid back. Cow. Actually went through, I don't remember how mom found the person, but clearly the person was not a true hitman. And she brought the money. I think it was $50,000, brought the cash in the hotel room. A cop. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you try to hire a hitman, it is always a cop.
How does one even try? A cop. How do you even are there like classified ads for this?
I got a story about that. I don't want to interrupt her, but that's wild.
Oh, you tell your story after mine though. That it is wild, right? But then, and here's the thing too. I'm a super liberal, but there's other things that I don't subscribe to sometimes, in the criminal. So mom then gets to have a court-appointed lawyer, even though she's been convicted of trying to kill dad to get kid. And we file the step-parent adoption here in Colorado. All of the statutory requirements are met. But mom, from the pen, gets to have the free lawyer when my client's spending significant amount, because he has to deal with all of these filings that mom is making, to try to stop the step-parent adoption. And in this case, we used a really well-known child psychologist. There was testimony. It was wonderful. And mom even admitted during her testimony here in Colorado, oh, yeah, I did this. Yeah, I wanted to protect my son because, again, this is like 10 years later. Dad's abusive. So mom's clearly still untethered from reality. But when that happened, And when the kid was adopted by who he had looked to as his mom for like 7 to 10 years, it's fantastic. Like you start crying. It's really wonderful. And then another step parent adoption I had, all the statutory requirements are met. I represent mom. In this case, the bio dad was in Washington in a federal prison because he had been up and down part of the West Coast, raping and killing prostitutes or women who were in sex work. And he too, of course, gets the lawyer appointed. And I bet Ryan and I might have a little different of opinion on that, but that's cool. And maybe not. Anyway, so bio dad gets to fight about this, and client has to spend a ton of money. And his lawyer is just so adamant, and it has to go for like a 2-day hearing. And then finally, during the second day lunch break, bio dad says, or right after that, bio dad says, I don't object anymore. And so the step parent adoption goes through. 2 kids in that case, young ones, had been with their stepdad, who's now their legal parent, for about 5 or 6 years, and just fantastic bonds. And now they all feel whole because now the kiddos get to have mom's last name, and they're who they look to as their dad's last name. It's just, those things make me feel extremely, those type of things make you happy. The judge is happy. Everybody's crying. It's really positive.
How often does the civil divorce stuff dip its foot in the criminal side? Do you see that? Is that because you just shared 2 parental adoptions that were, I'm assuming, kind of exceptions. It's usually not serial killer rapist
right.
stuff. But how often do you see, just in a regular divorce, domestic violence, criminal charges going along with it?
So you see that the same amount of time you see it in a divorce, you're going to see it in like a post-decree parenting time issue, because once you have the intimate partners, then it doesn't matter whether you had an intimate partner a year ago and separated, or you separated 10 years ago. It's still coming under that domestic violence intimate partner issue. When I started practicing, lawyers would be really underhanded. They would file the divorce and then file a temporary protection order. So kind of moving it from the criminal world into the civil, but the protection order world. And in Colorado, ex parte, one party just goes and says, oh yeah, spouse is mean to me, parent is mean to me. Court automatically grants the temporary protection order. So you have a spouse sitting at home that doesn't know anything, and all of a sudden, knock, knock, you're served with not only a petition for divorce, but also a protection order, which means you got to get out of your house. You can't go to your kid's school. You can't go anywhere near anyone for 14 days. Imagine that. And I've got a case right now. Imagine that happens to you. You're blindsided. You think your spouse will deal spouses. You think your spouse still loves you. So what do you do when you get the protection order that says no contact? Well, what do you
call them and say, what's going on?
You text your spouse. You call your spouse. You call the parents. You do anything you can. Now that right there, wait, what is that? That's domestic violence, criminal case, violation of a temporary protection order. And now, now we don't know what's going to happen on the back end, but we sure as hell know what's happening on the front end. That spouse is calling 911. He did this, and you're getting picked up, and you have to, in Colorado, you have to do an overnight, no matter what, right? You get charged with a DV, you're doing an overnight. And
like you're in jail overnight.
That's what I mean. You're in jail overnight. And I have a case last Halloween. I represent mom. Dad was mad because mom had 2-year-old for Halloween. Dad and mom got into it, text messages, which, by the way, are the devil between parents. Mom didn't threaten. Mom maybe swore at him a couple times. Dad did the same thing. Dad, in this case, lived in a place where he called the police. Police went over and arrested mom. Domestic violence harassment charge based on non-threatening text messages. Dad got what he wanted. He got the kiddo for Halloween. And mom, eventually the charge went away. But she had to pay money for the criminal defense attorney to fight the bogus charge. And now she's got to go, and then you have the domestic violence thing hanging around until it goes away. So I see that a lot. And the problem with domestic violence is the victim is hardly, if ever, believed in the family law context. I just got out of a case where dad threw a book at mom, hit her in the head in front of one of the kiddos. There were 4 kiddos. She calls the police. Police come. Dad admits it. Yeah, I hit her. Kind of like nonchalantly, like, yeah, I do it all the time. Police are like, okay, you're going to get arrested. He pleads guilty, protection or, criminal protection order. We go to court, and there are so many communications where dad is belittling. Dad is calling her names, even though there's a protection order, a criminal restraining order, excuse me. And the judge says, yeah, and I see some, not great communication, but, I think it was a one-time thing. And so equal parenting time.
Yikes. One of my coworkers' sons went through something similar in the case of like ultimately the step parent adoption thing, but also with the domestic abuse stuff, where he and his first wife had the wife had a daughter that wasn't his biologically, but he became very, very close to her, and as things started to fall apart with their marriage, the wife was starting to use drugs again, and he came home one night where the daughter was asleep and the wife was doing blow in the kitchen, and he kind of lost his shit, and he like knocked the plate of blow off, and she's freaking out, and he grabbed her arm. That was it. That's all he did was grab her arm, and she took pictures because there was like a red mark or something, and as the divorce proceedings started, he got that same like kind of call of like, hey, you're basically under arrest, and he's like, what the hell did I do? I was trying to get the drugs out of the house.
Yeah.
And this all became important when the later proceedings, came up and like who got custody and stuff like that. But for the very short term, his mom had to go bail him out of jail, when he was just trying to protect his stepdaughter.
Yeah. And that happens. Unfortunately, it happens often where you've got, and especially it happens a lot with the dads, where dads are dealing with substance addicted moms, and there's a lot of codependency. So dad feels bad about leaving. And then dad tries to help, in any way, shape, or form. I'm not talking about beating or horrible things, just kind of like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Calls, he gets picked up. Now he's out of the house because the mandatory protection order is issued. And now like mom has this great weapon to use when it's about the kiddos.
Yeah. In Virginia, they have, we constantly deal with that in DV cases where for the actual criminal charge of assault and battery, domestic assault and battery, the law enforcement has no discretion. If that simple scenario, where wife says, I got mad, so I was calling him names. So he ended up pushing me in the chest to get me out of the way. And, the husband admits it. He was like, yeah, I was over it. I wanted to remove myself. They have no discretion.
Correct.
If it is unwanted touching and there's a domestic relationship, they have to charge. Now, the reason for that is you can think back, maybe not that long ago in certain rural parts or otherwise, where Joe Bob is so-and-so's cousin and I have a lot of discretion here. And, on really bad domestic violence cases, just protecting the abuser because he knows the sheriff or something and no one getting charged. So they had to pass the law to make sure domestic violence got enforced. And in some cases, it feels like it's flipped on its head. So you get like a couple that's been married for 40 years and really innocuous kind of touching ends up with a criminal charge. Luckily, I live in a jurisdiction where the deputies will be proactive with that and say, hey, they'll put it in the report like the reason this is charged is because it's a statutory obligation and for no other reason. So it kind of highlights to us how it should maybe be handled, and we have a lot of discretion. I've even put on files like this is a dumb one, but you got to go to court. I can't stop it before the first court appearance.
And I don't want us to come across in any way as we are minimizing or trying to throw domestic violence victims who are both men and women in any way to minimize what they've gone through and the trauma and how difficult it is to leave a relationship. We're just talking about in this specific scenario, how, emotions that are hot and heavy can lead to both sides doing physical things that they would never do. And not to the point where it's always harmful, but not to the point where we're talking about leaving marks or doing things like that. It's like, kind of who didn't get into a shoving match once in a while with their partner? Maybe like 10% of us who are angels, I guess, but it happens.
This conversation about the domestic violence that can kind of like not be that big a deal, but then go bad. It's just as a Denver Broncos fan, Von Miller, first time it happened, everyone wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then it just kept happening, even in other states. And now it's like, is he that good of a guy? Don't know.
Well, we know, right? It's like, okay, don't do these things. And you maybe not. Yeah. So look at all three of you are married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's really interesting.
I'm not going to call it Ryan Connor. I'll cut this part. He's been married a couple times, but I don't know what he feel comfortable talking. It's part of his comedy act, so he's probably okay with it.
God damn, it would have been perfect to have him on here. He'd be dropping little divorce jokes left and right.
Where is he? He couldn't come today?
I can't remember. Traveling. I think he's got a show or something.
Oh, that's cool.
I love it. I love his joke where it's like, you get a divorce, you're going to want another one.
Right.
Like,
Well, that's a huge question to me too. Like, why are you doing this again? So people think that divorce is like one and done. And no. Divorce is the gift for the divorce lawyer that keeps on giving, because they just come back and my wonderful clients who I adore, will call me after the fact. And I tell them, you could have told me before, I would have given you this as your wedding present, a prenup, but here we are. Let's go again.
Ooh. That's so you have repeat customers then?
So many of my current clients I've helped before. Now, it's not always the divorce stuff, right? It is modification of parenting time, child support. But then again, people get married again, just like people have babies again with different partners, and that repeats as well. And we're not as a society, we are not aware. We're not saying, oh, this happened in this place, in this situation. How can I make myself be better in the second situation? Maybe not repeat the dynamic. Maybe learn more about the person. Mostly let's just go right back into the pattern that we know. And the pattern that we know 99% of the time is not the healthy one. And that's what brings you to see me in the first place.
So you have people that complain about every facet of their life of like, this bad thing happened here, and this person was bad over here. And it's like, who's the common denominator in all these scenarios? Maybe we need to do a little internal review there.
Just get a mirror and look at it for a little while, do a little journaling. Let's get a mirror. And if we just became a little bit more conscious, a little bit more aware, and a little bit more understanding, I think that people would be entering into these relationships that are sanctioned by whatever state you live in a different way.
Let me ask with regard to you go into a profession and you deal with it with your own personal experiences. Have your own personal experience or past informed you? And do you think it's assisted you? Were you particularly more adept at dealing with certain clients or certain situations because of your own personal history?
Well, I think I definitely, when I was younger, I was in a very hostile, terrible situation. My parents got divorced when I was young. Then my mother remarried to kind of that evil stepfather, the archetype of every bad thing you can think of. And I saw things that a kid doesn't need to see, perpetrated by my stepfather. And it puts me in a very now, and since I've been doing this work, I find myself advocating for the child a lot more, especially knowing if there's a step parent involved. And if that kid is saying, hey, step parent is doing X or Y, I am very attuned to that, because that's what happens. It's statistically, and, not just necessarily sexual abuse or physical abuse, just, a wide array of it. If a kid is saying something about the step parent, more likely than not, there's a level that's happening, not just about jealousy between kid and parent, not about getting left out, but there's so much nasty dynamic between an adult coming into another adult's life that has a child that I've seen just is horrible. So I'm very strong, strident with my clients who come to me and are like, well, the other parent is saying kid's not happy at my house because of step parent. And I get into them, like, what's going on? What's happening? What is happening? What are you allowing? And quite frankly, I'm like, what are you allowing to do? What is this non-parent doing with your child? And a lot of times they wake up. Sometimes they don't want to hear it. And that means I'm not their attorney anymore. I'm in a really positive position and a healthy position in my career that I don't have to take everybody that walks in my door. And if I have a client who's not going to be aware when I see things that could potentially be harmful for a kiddo, I'm out.
Even having the luxury of being able to be more selective, doesn't it wear on you? I mean, I just feel like something like the contentiousness that family law can be, is it something that you have to do anything in particular to try to deal with, or is it just doesn't affect you?
Oh,
You're
no.
able to leave it at the door?
Absolutely not. So there are certain things that wonderful mentors have taught me. And then there's some kind of other metaphysical, woo-woo stuff that I do that really helps. The first thing is you don't take your work home. If you have to stay in your office, until you feel like you're completed and it's done, then you stay at that office. You do not bring your work home. Now, post-COVID, that's a whole nother situation. But literally, you just don't bring it into your home. Okay. You leave it because it's so emotional and so so much dark energy around it and sometimes. And what I've created for myself is no one gets my personal cell phone number. Post COVID, I got an office cell phone and we have another one. And so if I know I'm not going to be in the office, I'll make calls, but I'm not picking up my cell phone for a client. It's just, that's too much. That's too much of a, what do I want to say? A blending, and a really good rule to keep myself from acting out towards other attorneys or towards judges is I do the 48-hour rule, and I teach my clients this, which helps as well. And this was just the best advice I ever got from the man I worked under. 48-hour rule. If you get an email or if you receive a phone call, or if you're dealing with your clients, you tell them if you receive a text and you are emotionally any way revved up, you do not respond for 48 hours. That works for me. And I apply that to my personal life as well. Now for clients, I tell them, this is what I want you to do. 48 hours. And I understand you can't do that right now. So if you can't do 48, do 24. If you can't do 24, do 12. If you can't do 12, do 2 hours, 1 hour. Start with 15 minutes.
Don't immediately text and threaten your ex when you have a restraining order. Give it at least 48 hours.
Give it a minute. Or it's just, the damn technology, man. It has that, technology has definitely aided in the hostility and the acrimony between spouses, because it's super easy to just pick up your phone and say something extremely nasty, and then the other person sees it. It's that immediate jump. And now off we go. Now we're off to the races, 2 days later of nasty texting. And now I can use that as evidence. And you've also put yourself out there emotionally where you're in absolute turmoil. How can you parent your kid when you're so focused on being angry at your ex? And I think that's really important for a lot of lawyers. And I've tried to, some of the attorneys that I work with or come to look for me for some advice, that's like the first rule I teach them. And yeah, so it does. I also have a water feature in my office because water is supposed to help clear out emotions. And we take Palo Santo probably every other month and kind of smudge. And I don't work a full 40-hour week, and I don't have my employees work a full 40-hour week. We do an 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, dedicated lunch 12 to 1. Nobody's picking up the phone. And then we close at noon on Fridays, because I think that what we do is so emotionally draining that even just carving out a 4-hour time period on Friday afternoons where you can do what you want. You don't necessarily have to be parenting your kid at home. You don't have to be with your spouse. You just have 4 hours. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. However, my employees really like it and I love it. You just have a little bit of time that you can just spend doing something on your own to process everything you've had to deal with during the week.
It probably helps a lot with employee retention too, right? You find somebody quality, it's hard to keep them.
Yeah, they like it. And I pay full time. So I don't just pay you for 36 or 34 hours or something. I pay 40-hour week wages. And I just think it's really, or income. It's really important to give, especially with what we do. And like you've said, Ryan, like how contentious and how do you deal with it? So important for not only your employees to be valued, but to have some space too, where they can kind of slough it off as well. And of course, I have a therapist who I see every week who's wonderful. And you were asking more about like personal stuff. Well, rather than bringing personal into the divorce, I went through a divorce myself. There's that joke, who's going to marry a divorce lawyer, right? Someone who's going to end up being divorced. And it's hard to share your children, no matter how amicable or difficult, it's hard to share your kids. What I've learned from what I do is how to take that step back, how to do your best to keep your kids out of whatever turmoil you have with your co-parent, and how to give your co-parent grace, which is something I couldn't do in my marriage, but I'm able to do it in the divorce scenario, where rather than jumping down his throat or immediately thinking the worst things and then just spouting it off, I do my own 48-hour, sometimes 72 hours, sometimes 96, because it's not worth having those hostile feelings to your spouse, because it's always going to bleed into your kids. And of course, you're going to have those feelings, but you don't have to act out on them. And that's really helped as well. And we were pretty acrimonious and hostile when we first got divorced. We're 4 years separated now. And he comes over, regardless of whose Halloween it is. I stay at my house and hand out candy, and he takes the kids trick-or-treating. This Christmas, he travels back to Illinois to spend time with his family. And we're supposed to trade kids on Christmas Day. And he asked if he could just come return them later on Christmas Day. And I was like, just stay until the 27th. Okay. Just have that extra time. I know how important it is for the kids to see their cousins, and it's okay. And so when you can start operating in that manner, that it's about the kids, not about you. It's hard, but you can get there. And that the divorce part has helped me get there. Because if I was not a divorce lawyer, I'm sure it would be just turmoil and insanity, because he's an Aries and I'm a Leo and we butt heads like crazy.
Oh, that's interesting. Because my question was, how did your personal life help in your profession? Your profession helped with your personal life of making it more amicable.
Both, right? I know how to deal with clients based on what I dealt with as a kid. I have a lot of empathy. I'm not some rich kid whose parents paid for undergrad and law school and then put them in some kind of firm. I bootstrapped myself to where I am, and think because of like working in the restaurant industry for a long time and being around all different people in all walks of life, I have that ability to not only talk with people and get them to immediately talk to me about what's going on, but I have that empathy side where I'm not sitting in judgment of you. I'm not telling you you're evil and I'm also not telling you that you're, the best parent in the world and you're going to get everything your way. That's really helped me be the lawyer part. Also being in therapy. I mean, I wear a lot of hats. I'm like, you come and confess to me. You ask me what's going to happen. I'm the therapist. I'm the financial planner, because as divorce lawyers, we have to know a lot about finances and your finances. And then coming into my personal life, I'm helpful with my friends who are going through these things. And it's helped me manage a divorce that could have been the worst. And now, we co-parent, we work together. Our kiddos are having some issues and we're on board with each other. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? How do we do this together? Or, what are we going to do together? So it's positive and it's gotten a lot better.
With this kind of spills into my world here. We haven't really, we touched a little bit about like how nasty parents can get with each other, or how nasty two people can get with each other. But once you add kids in there, the whole dynamic is so much more just taken up to 11. And when I see it spill out into my world where like the parents can't even be in the same room for like a visit, or they want me to like do extra documentation to like call them afterwards. I'm like, I'm not doing this. You are two adults. You can talk to each other. I'm not your go-between. That's not my job.
I see.
And this is all hurting your children.
I see that so much with the medical professionals, the pediatricians who are like, they'll make one parent will do a gotcha. They'll make the annual.
Yeah, we see that very frequently.
Yeah, the physical visit.
I don't understand. Do a gotcha?
I'll explain it. Okay, so they use like the pediatrician to do a gotcha on the other parent, right? So what they'll do is they'll schedule appointments. One parent will schedule appointments for the kiddos, and they'll not tell the other parent. And so on one side, the other parent doesn't know that the doctor's appointment is happening, can't go because doesn't know. But then the parent uses the other parent not going as a way in the divorce to kind of get at you. Well, you don't go to doctor's appointments. Well, I can't go to doctor's appointments because you don't tell me about them. And then, I've also seen, I have this case that's happening for like 8 years. Mom would go to the pediatrician, make allegations that dad was doing inappropriate things to kid. Then doctor would say, hey, mom, will you leave kid so I can ask her questions? And mom wouldn't leave. Mm-hmm.
So we are trained in how to write notes and how to take histories very particularly. And that's a good one there, where the way you would document that is just like every statement is per mom, child said this and this, or per this parent, this is what happened. And then, when asked to speak with the child directly, mom refused, and all this. You're not passing judgment, but you're definitely making it clear that like the kid didn't say this. It's like the forensic interviewing stuff. It's
right.
It's all about how you document it. There, we tend to try to like step back and be like, we're not getting involved in this one.
Right.
Yeah, there was I'm thinking of a case where the defendant had assaulted his 16-year-old daughter, and she, unrelated to that, was getting like a physical, like a regular physical for sports or something like that. And he wanted to stay in the room. I was like, that's all I need to know about that guy. A 16-year-old daughter. Why is an adult man staying in the room for a physical of a 16-year-old daughter?
Oh,
right?
No.
Yeah, huge alarm bells.
And I just realized something too, that Ryan and I have been the primary ones kind of like drumming up guests and things like that. And the last two guests have been mine. And I just realized that I picked two people that Ryan can geek out with absolutely perfectly. The last one was a flight medic. And so he spent the whole time talking about pilot shit.
Helicopter stuff that had nothing to do with baggage. Yeah.
Baggage, yeah.
Yeah. It was all like technical aviation stuff. And yeah.
I'm proud of you, Ryan. You have not geeked out too much this time around with law
No,
stuff?
I mean, I think part of it is I'm interested because I don't know. I know nothing about family law, and I don't want to,
Right.
because it seems so just
Because your job is just to, a barrel of monkeys.
Right.
I mean, it really is what I was talking about before. This is one of the points I wanted to make. When you were talking about emotion, you're in a courtroom with the thing that is most emotional. You're litigating emotion. And when you're dealing with emotion, you sacrifice rationality.
Right.
And I will have people that have committed armed robbery be like, I mean, you got me on video, you got my fingerprint. What are we talking about here? They're very rational. They're very rational about how to approach this, or even to a lesser extent, but even a lot of sexual assault defendants will be like, I know, my goose is cooked. You got the evidence against me. Let's talk about resolving this. That kind of logical thinking, rational thinking seems to go out the window when you want to take my kid. You said the words, I'm never going to see my kid again. Gloves off.
Yeah. And think about where the person's brain is, right? So we all know that emotions are back here in our lizard brain, right? Back at the bottom of the skull, right? That's where emotions, that's where our fight or flight or freeze live. And we also always know that the rational brain is up here in our forehead. Well, if you're in that fight, flight, freeze, you're scared that someone's taking your kid. You're scared that you're going to lose your livelihood. You're scared that a parent's going to be able to relocate and take your kid to Hawaii from Colorado. Are you able to think rationally in the front of your brain, or are you stuck over here where your lizard brain lives and you are just unable? Because what therapists say and what research says is when your lizard brain's activated, your rational brain's not. You're offline. So you have someone in court that is scared not only to be on the stand and then have to listen to not completely have to listen to fabricated stories about who they are as a human, how they parent. There is no way you're staying up here. There's no way you're staying in your rational brain. And then everything, it's not even just gloves are off. It's like, I can't not regulate my nervous system because my nervous system is so scared and so freaked out. And, it's an explosion every which way. And that's another reason why I really try to keep my clients out of the courtroom, because a judge who sees you, they could judge as a human, could have gotten out of the bed hating men, hating women, hating everybody, hating the lawyers, hating dads, hating moms. You don't know what happened in the judge's house before they left and got on the stand. And so to defend a judge, like, judge doesn't know you. Judge doesn't know your kids. Judge only sees you for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, and then makes a decision. But if we can take that away and keep parents out of that and keep spouses out of that situation, you hardly ever come back from that. And so to take that part away, that fighting in court away, they have a lot better ability to recover. And so I settle about 85% of my cases, probably go to court maybe on 15%. And it's typically not because my clients are bullheaded, because my clients understand that if they're bullheaded and they don't listen to their lawyer, they're not going to have this lawyer. And that's too another way, Ryan, you asked, how does this not just overwhelm you? Well, I'm not sitting in a position. Now, sometimes, of course, your radar doesn't go off as early as you hope it does. And there's situations where that happens. But for the most part, my radar is real good with my clients. And I'm not going to deal with anything that I don't feel comfortable dealing with. I don't have to represent you when I know you're calling the mother of your kids terrible names that we don't like to repeat, right? I don't have to deal with you like that. I don't have to deal with the parent that's threatening to take a kid away. I'm not going to, to the best of my ability, I'm not going to represent that person. So the contention is usually on a lot more on the other side. And you can deal with that a lot better than you having to have the person you're developing a relationship with. You have to deal with that contentiousness. So it's a little bit different. It's easier when it's farther away from you to deal with the hostility and the contention, because then I can also put a little bit of a funny spin on it. And rather than beating my head against a brick wall, kind of get a little sarcastic and funny about it. And then it rolls with you better and it rolls off you quicker.
Well, I remember, I think everybody that became a lawyer in a certain time period grew up with Law and Order. And one of my favorite lines from Law and Order that stuck with me is, how to view defense attorneys. And I think the defense attorneys were like victims in that episode or something like that. And someone said they treated divorce like the death of a marriage, and it should be treated with respect, like any death would.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really interesting way of doing it. And when you have that mindset of like, look, this is something that's happening, and it needs to be dealt with respectfully, and like adults
and kindly.
They need those people that are driving the boat there.
Yeah, and kindness is really important. And what kind of along those lines, what I tell my clients is, I know it can be hard to hear right now, but man, a band that's together for 10 years, that's a really great job. A business that's open for 10 years, that's fantastic. You made it through. You have a marriage, you have beautiful kids. You don't hate each other. We don't have to make you hate each other. You had 10 years. That's a good run. That's a decade. And that's counterintuitive to how we feel like, oh, marriages need to be together forever. Well, that was in, the old times, like Adrian was talking about, right? With the ownership and the property. It's not the world we live in right now. And it's okay. So many people think it's just such a failure and they feel so bad about themselves. It's okay. A relationship that lasts for 10 years, that's fantastic. Great job.
One old observation or a quip I used to hear as a kid and used to think was so awful. And now as I've become an adult and been married for a while, I really get it. And I want to preface this with, I absolutely love my wife to death. Like, she is fantastic. I really, really love her. But the joke of just like, love is waking up next to someone after 10 years and not wanting to murder them.
Absolutely.
And it was so cynical. Like, you hear that as a kid, and that sounds so awful. But now when you see couples that get divorced, or even just in your own marriage, where like, things aren't always rainbows and butterflies, and just waking up next to someone and not wanting to smother them with a pillow is a really good, important step.
Especially after 10 years, for sure.
Man, I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast.
She doesn't listen to this shit at all.
Okay.
I know married couples that are just like, would you stop breathing? I can hear you across the room. I can hear you breathe.
Oh yeah. They come to me. If they say too much to the other person, I'll be seeing them.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I'm now going to go explain to my wife why I was spending the last hour with a divorce attorney, but we're good. And if anybody is in the Colorado area, how would they find you? What kind of services can they find from you?
So you can find me at Front Range Family Law. That's www.front, F-R-O-N-T, range, R-A-N-G-E, family, F-A-M-I-L-Y, law, L-A-W.com, 720-456-6471. And if you think that you and your spouse are heading towards a divorce and you're both okay with going that way, you just need some help to see how the rubber meets the road. Our other fantastic business venture is called Divorce Depot, D-I-V-O-R-C-E, D-E-P-O-T, divorcedepot.com. And if you think that you and spouse can get through it amicably, you don't need to spend $50,000. Come to us and we'll take care of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. This was great.
So Adrian, if you have anything you want to plug, I want to plug for you your recent article on Wrath-Bearing Tree, an alternative view of moral injury, and encourage everybody to go online and check that out. Adrian, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. Thanks. And this is a terrific conversation. I've learned a lot.
Ryan couldn't be here for this episode, but check him out at ryanconnorcomedy.com for his shows, buy his book, buy his specials, all good stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
Bye, guys. It was a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you. Music for Baggage provided by Quincy Ledbetter. You can find his stuff at qledbetter.com. Graphics provided by Megan Weaver. You can find her at meganweaverart.com. Special thanks to our premium members for their support. You can become a premium member by clicking subscribe in your Apple Podcast app or by visiting thebaggagepodcast.com/support to sign up or to gift a membership to someone. A percentage of all proceeds go to charity. If you have any questions, comments, or a good story to share, please email us at thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com.